Yo, what's poppin'? It's Jonathan, and we have day one of week three of the Countdown Cup for NA matches. Two of them I did not bother watching Houston versus Paris because you know what? I had it on the side a little bit. That was exactly the kind of game you thought it was going to be. Houston had Dante on some Diva, on some Zarya, no Doge, happily. Parisa was closer than you'd expect. It was like a 4-3 for Houston, so Paris ended up capping it all the way. But not too much there. I guess if you want to, let me know down below. Maybe you have a review of the Paris Houston game, your thoughts on it if you watched it, or just let me know your thoughts on the other two games we have today. Before I get into this, like this video and subscribe for more daily Overwatch League content if you enjoy this kind of stuff. And anyway, getting into it with the Boston Uprising against the Washington Justice, which was a pretty damn close game. Washington showed up, and you know what? Decay especially showed up. And that's what you need for Washington if you want to move into the play-ins. You want to make a real shot at getting into the playoffs. Only two of the four teams in the play-ins between what looks like it could change, but it looks like it's going to be like Washington, Boston, Toronto, and one other guy, Florida. They also play today. So it looks like it's probably going to end up being those guys. But there are some options. It's possible Toronto moves up. Basically, is the only thing. Possible Florida move up if they win like literally all of their matches left, which is probably not going to happen. But yeah, so we more than likely than not know who's going to be there, and Washington have a pretty good chance of pulling out. And I thought Boston was my favorite going out. I thought Boston was going to win. I thought they were kind of going to roll, so I was really high on them, and they didn't quite show that pizzazz that I wanted, that extra little step that I thought they could give. Which I thought they could give all season. It never happened. I thought, you know what, it can happen now with Lori gone. Didn't happen. Anyway, so Boston playing Valentine, Victoria, Punk, MCD, and Crimzo. Washington playing Assassin, Decay, Kalios, Krillin, and Opener, because of course they are. Dave for marketing is not coming in anytime soon. Busan is a 2-0 for Boston, and they kind of win this off rip. The common themes with these teams is Washington enjoy playing the Lucio a lot. They have Opener, so the only other option for him whenever they play double flex support is to play the Ana. So they just run Ana Lucio all the time, whereas Boston play the Zen Bap. So that's the core difference between the compositions. Yeah, Boston also isn't playing the Sombra, and Washington is on. They're playing a Sojourn, Orisa, Bap, and then Tracer Zen for Boston, Sombra, Lucio for Washington. And it's always like MCD on the Zen is doing so much damage that the extra speed boost that you take from getting from point A to point B and with such a long sightline on Mecha Base, and New Queen Street when you get to it, which is the other loss of the series for Washington, it's just not. The Lucio speed boost does not outvalue the extra damage MCD is outputting with the Discord orb, with the just the raw damage from him hitting his shots anyway. And if you compare the ultimates, to be pretty comparable. Maybe Transcendence could be a little better because it's a little easier to build. But if you consider the ultimates pretty even, Zen was getting more value there. And that was the biggest thing because Washington, they were being very aggressive. They looked really good. But Boston, able to handle it well. They can kite back that aggression, let MCD put out enough damage to actually come back and retaliate in. And that's how they end up putting Mecha. Based on downtown, it's kind of similar. I felt like Washington, very aggressive off the start, and they actually held the point for a pretty considerable amount of time. But they fumble their ultimates. It looks like they're going to go for an EMP dive, but instead you get a manual hack, which gets forced out and doesn't actually force anything. This gives Boston the opportunity to go in with their own Sombra EMP. And it just, they didn't pull the trigger, and maybe they should have. Maybe a little bit greedy there, trying to maximize usage of their ults, trying to say, oh, we don't need to use ult right now. If I get this hack, we can still win. Doesn't actually work out. Boston take control of the point, and they end up winning because the next EMP, Boston spread out really far, so the EMP doesn't catch a lot, and they end up losing downtown as well. Then we go over to Kings Row, which is a 4-3 for Washington. This one was pretty close. It was more of a stylistic difference here. You had Boston playing the Tracer, Sombra, Diva, Zen, Ana, with Washington playing the Sombra, Genji, Zarya, Ana, Lucio, with Decay going off for the Genji and onto the Tracer on their attack, or on the defense rather. And then they would also play the double flex support with the Zen, Ana on the defense as well. And it was just like Washington on their offense, you would win the frontline battle, and that would be the biggest thing. It actually opened up with Krillin hitting a big sleep on the Victoria, and they end up winning the frontline battle there, and they have 5 minutes in the B, and then they just kind of roll through B2, and then they were just on a mission. They end up capping with 352, an insane speed. That's the 5th fastest cap of the season, so that's how you know it's like pretty damn fast. And the thing is, even though Punk went over to the Zarya at the end, like after A, he didn't have the speed boost, and on a map like Kings Row, the speed boost is so much more valuable because Zen doesn't have those long sight lines to be able to really get that damage you need to make the loss of being able to set tempo outweighs, just Kalios being able to go where he wants to, whenever he wants to. He's able to disengage better from Punk if he needs to reset bubbles or anything like that. And it just kind of edges out for Boston in that sense, for Washington in that sense. But Boston also have a pretty good offense. They don't cap with almost any time. They have 8 seconds barely, so they just narrowly avoid just playing for a draw. But basically, they end up coming out of A pretty quickly as well, and they end up coming out of C quickly as well because they are also doing the pressure point thing. Um, or they're winning the front lane battle in a different way because they pressure the point. Kalios is on the high ground on the Zarya. He's forced to drop then eventually. They end up backing up. They get Nanopunk. They go onto him, and they end up capping out there. And then Punk actually hits a 2K bomb to push through, and MCD tranks the Assassin's EMP, so you just keep on going through B. But on C, they do get held for a while. Punk gets a little too aggressive. Maybe it looks like he was probably expecting a nano boost to dive in, but he didn't get one, so it just looks like he inted, which is unlucky for him. But then Punk goes over to the Zarya, and they just barely manage to cap with 8 seconds left. I feel like it kind of was a misplay from Washington. They definitely could have been able to stall to 0. Krillin came out with a Transcendence maybe a little too early than he needed to. They didn't quite stagger out as well as I thought they could have. Maybe they thought, oh, we don't need a stagger, it's winnable. But at that point, you have 4 minutes almost. Just play for the single tick. It doesn't matter in the end because Boston's offense plays very slow, but they wait way too long. Kalios gets too high charge and he wins. And then on the offense, Washington have a lot of big scrappy fight, but its scrappy fight kind of favors them in this case because they have way closer spawns, so they end up winning that way too. And King's ends up being a 4-3 for Washington when it could have just been a 3-2 probably, but whatever. Then we get Circuit Royale, which is a 5-4 for Washington, and you have Seeker coming in for Valentine. This is where Decay really goes crazy. He definitely diffed Seeker on the Sojourn. Seeker not being able to keep up that performance that he had when he came in against Vancouver in the last match of the Summer Showdown qualifiers for Boston. That's a lot of words. Now, I guess it was kind of unrealistic to have him exceed those expectations because that was a truly exceptional performance when he diffed Aspire. Doesn't have that same. He still has some good impact here, but Decay is definitely getting the better edge on him. Washington ended up rolling through A 5 minutes into B, and they just keep on rolling because Decay hits a Nano Blade. He just rolls through there. I remember Decay on the Sojourn, but maybe it wasn't this map. I might be misspeaking, actually, because he's on the Genji here, I believe. Or, no, wait. What? Why is he on the Genji when... I'm so confused. He definitely hit the Nano Blade, though. Oh, no, he didn't. I'm stupid. He was on the Sojourn here. Of course he was. They have Assassin. They don't have another option. Ignore all that. I'm tripping, bro. I'm tripping. So, anyway, they go into C off of a Nano Blade from Assassin, not Decay. And Boston actually stabilized at the end pretty easily, but they do take... They don't really... It was really weird, because Boston have the ult advantage here, and Punk has the grab, but he never actually uses it. And eventually he uses it, but only after he's inside of Kalios' grab at the very end there. And he just... Like, you just had to set tempo at some point. You couldn't let Washington sit back, play for picks, and just choose their engagement so freely. They were under almost no pressure, and they were just kind of sitting there, trading nothing, really, trading bubble cooldowns. So eventually Punk ends up not having the bubbles he needs. He gets grabbed, he dies. His grab doesn't do anything because he's not there to follow up anymore. And then they just kind of end up winning. Now, Washington did actually kind of force that because they forced... with a nano onto Assassin, they did force a Transcendence eventually, so I guess that was the cue for the grab. But Boston just let them do what they wanted, and they ended up not capping out. Washington ended up having like 213, I think, according to what I said down there. Anyway, Boston, they on their offense, they end up playing a Sombra, Sigma, Zen, Ana. Or, no, that doesn't make any sense. They end up playing Victoria on the Sombra instead of the Widow. And then Washington play the Sigma Zen with the Ana. And Washington hold really close when they lose, so it doesn't really work at the end. They give up a lot of ground, and they just kind of take the momentum and win with a window around to cap out A. They keep going through B, but they're ending up with Washington holding at the very end of B for a bit, because Opener hits a huge nade. But then Seeker goes through, kills B, and then Victoria just pops off on C, decimates on the Widowmaker. He just decides, I'm going to take over the game right here. He does, and that's that. And Boston ended up finishing the map with 113, and Victoria's going crazy on the Widow. He actually gets through A with a single minute, basically. But Decay ends up popping off to hold Boston on the incline. And then on Washington's offense, Assassin goes in over the top, distracts the back line. Punk ends up falling because of it, and they're able to pull through and win the map with Graviton, and the other alts that follow suit. New Queen Street ends up being a 92 to 89 for Boston. Valentine comes back in. And this is, once again, the same thing as Lijiang, where you have the Zen against the Lucio. And Washington also play the Genji Sombra, but that quickly becomes Tracer. And I don't agree with that as much. I think you really want the Genji to try and have some of that dive with you, that extra burst that you need whenever they have the Zenyatta. So they have more burst than you at this point. I think if you have the Genji, you can better you have better bubbles for Kalios. You have better pressure that is sustained on the backline, higher lethality rate with the Genji, right? And this lets the speed boost be much more effective. That's just how I think about it. But I'm not gonna. I mean, Decay clearly wanted to play the Tracer, so it's Decay. He's gonna do what he wants. He kind of is the team in some ways. So he ends up going on the Genji or onto the Tracer eventually. But to me, it was definitely MCD getting more value than the speed boost would let him because of the new Queen Street sightlines. And that's the biggest thing. Like, Washington had the lead for a bit, but Boston ends up taking it in the end. And then we go over to Lijiang, 2-0 for Washington. They just kind of roll this one. And the biggest thing here to start off with was the synchronization between Decay and Assassin here was really good. And I can't speak, bro. The Lucio was getting a lot more value here as well than the Zenyatta, because again, he doesn't have the sightlines. Zenyatta on Gardens, where is he sitting that he's getting the sightlines? He can sit out in White Room, but he's very susceptible to a dive there. He can sit on the bridge. He's very susceptible to getting booped there. It doesn't work out. The Lucio gets way more value. The tempo that Washington's able to set works, and they just kind of win. And then Control Center, you get Orisa, Bap, Lucio, May mirrors, with Boston playing Sojourn and Washington playing Reaper. And with how aggressive they're playing, they're not giving Victoria any time to get any picks on the Sojourn. They're just running at the front line. Decay's getting much more value on the Reaper, and they end up winning that one 100 to 15 as well, or 100 to 0, I think it's supposed to be. Or no, it's 100 to something, because I remember Washington actually lost a fight because they just didn't want to use ults, and they just came back and won the next one. Anyway, play the match for me is going to Decay. He was on today, 100%. Great pop-off moments on every map consistently, on a lot of different heroes. And Boston just couldn't catch their breath to breathe. He was always in the back line. There were times where Crimzo, who I barely mentioned this entire time, he was just dying a lot. He wasn't able to get the big nades that I think they wanted from him on the Ana. That being said, it wasn't like Krillin or Opener was really popping off on it either. This was much more a battle between the difference between the Zenyatta and the Lucio, and the DPS line was doing a lot. That's just kind of how the maps turned out. But yeah, there was some times where Crimzo was dying very often, very quickly, and just didn't really work out because Decay was on. And then we're going over to the other matches. Vancouver Titans against the Florida Mayhem. It's being a 3-2 reverse sweep for Florida, and it was looking like all Vancouver all day at the beginning. So Vancouver playing Aspire, King, Mira, Sky Reaper, and Aztec to start, but that would become false for every map except for the last one again. And then Florida playing Hydra on Checkmate, Someone, Sermajet, and Rupel, and Onimo actually made an appearance on 2 maps. Surprisingly, I didn't think we'd see Onimo again this season, or next season, to be honest with you. But Busan ends up being a 2-0 for Vancouver, and they just kind of roll here. They're playing the Tracer Sombra Doom on a Brig, and it looks like Florida have no clue what they're doing against it. They're playing the Tracer Sombra Winston Lucio Ana, and the Doomfist is just going in, mirrors unhinged on it, unchecked. The dive is never being stopped between Aspire and King. And there's just poor all uses from Florida all around. They're not getting any value from it on downtown initially. You get Checkmate trying to EMP the dive, but they disengage as the EMP goes off. So while it does hit Mirror, he's already gone. He's already in the sky with his shift, so it doesn't matter. Someone hit a Primal and didn't really get anything either. Didn't make any space, just kind of did nothing. And Vancouver ended up winning downtown 100 to 6, and they went Sanctuary 100 to 0 because Florida come out on a Sojourn Tracer, Sigma, and Bap into the Doomfist, and Sigma just can't do anything there. He's getting punched around. They're taking angles on him. He can't even really sit on the point because he's gonna get punched off by Mirror. So it just doesn't work out there. He swaps to Diva. They try to do something, but Vancouver just know when they're going in, what's going on, and Florida just didn't have a clue. Then we go to Parisa, which is also really bad showing from Florida. I thought we were going to get a 3-0, a clean, easy 3-0 from Vancouver. I was like, oh, this team showed up today. They're looking really good, but it doesn't actually happen. So you get False coming in from Mirror, and it's a 2-1 win on Paraiso for Vancouver. playing Sojourn, Tracer, Zarya, Bab, Zen against the Tracer, Sombra, Zarya, Zen, Ana. So to start with the offense for Vancouver, they just kind of pulled up and won. Florida just didn't do anything. I don't know. They were just there was no dive, there was no backline pressure, there was nothing. So they just kind of won. But then they end up holding strong on B because it's Parisa B. Of course they do. It's very hard to get to the supports on the backline there, especially if you're playing the Sojourn Tracer. Like I think you really need the Genji if you want to break through B. And Vancouver was just unable to dislodge them, and they end up because they kept dying on the cross. They hit a window in a small room, like in that small high ground room that they have access to, and to try and take it. And they do take it, but as soon as they push out, they still die. So I don't know what was going on there. And Florida just hold at the end of B, but they also get held because you get false on the Sigma, Hydron on the Genji, and someone on the Winston for their offense. And Florida do capitalize on the offbeat Sigma pick by just going past him or taking him out immediately with the bubble because he can't get healing. And just like the Sigma just doesn't do anything here against the Winston comp. So they cap A pretty easily. And then someone goes over to the Zarya and False goes over to the D.Va for B. And then you get Hydron who's on the Genji, which you don't expect. He ends up making a great deal of space with a nano boost and pushes them very close to the end. But they don't win outright because they get a lot of trades going back the other way. And they just never really break through from there. You get Hydron on the Genji. He's trying to kill things with the blade. He gets some, but someone has energy, so it doesn't work out. And then he ends up wishy-washing around. He goes Sojourn for a fight. He goes Genji back for a fight. They look to do something. But Aspire's doing so much. He's getting so many picks. He's just sitting back on that high ground. There's no real pressure applied on him. And Florida just do not know how to break through that in any way. I don't know why you're so committed to the Sombra. You can put Hydron on the Sombra. He's done that before. Put Checkmate on the Genji if you absolutely want that big combo of the EMP Blade with the Nano Boost just to break through. There's just one fight. It looked like Florida were just going to cap it out, but Vancouver ended up holding on again, Aspire being that guy on the Sojourn, which is no surprise at this point in the season. Okay, so then we have Circuit Royale, and this is where things turn around for Florida because you have Hydron doing the most. On Vancouver's offense, they don't really get anything going on. Florida is just finding picks eventually. Oh, wait, Vancouver did the offense first. Let me talk about that first. So Vancouver on their offense, still, they're not getting anything going on. Hydron and Termajet are finding picks consistently along that long road initially. And eventually Vancouver is able to break someone's shield and get to around that bend, but they're just getting fragged. Vancouver can't step forward. There's nothing going on. Eventually, Aspire does get his pop off. He wins his fight because Aspire is good for a fight, good for a point, no doubt. In every single map, I would expect Aspire to get you a point, but that's where it stops because Florida comes back to winning. Aspire got some picks in the overtime, but it wasn't enough to actually carry through because False ended up dying, so they didn't have the point presence they needed. So they get held at the top of the incline. And then Florida's offense, you get Checkmate on the Genji, and Vancouver just gives to the bend. They don't really fight for that little stretch of road. But then King just kills 3 on the Hanzo, which, these are Sigma versus Sigma, by the way. And he ends up getting a lot. But you get a Nano Checkmate that goes in. He kills a lot. False ends up living, and they back around the corner. So Vancouver do stabilize because False never actually fully died. So if you have your Sigma still on that low ground there, and you have a support with him, if you got in any trades throughout that fight, you have pretty good odds to be able to stabilize there still. And they do. But then someone ends up whiffing his flux in the final fight. I thought, oh, it's over. It's all over. But luckily, they still had Checkmate's Blade, and they still had Trank to get through there. So they end up capping A, and they just kind of capped B. Vancouver didn't get the touch right at the end because as someone was approaching, False body blocked him and rocked him away. So there wasn't actually a touch there. I don't know, maybe there could have been a comp for another touch because I think they were playing the Tracer at that point still. Or the Genji, rather. So there may be a miscommunication there. But it was looking like it probably was going to go the way of Florida anyway, or at least it wasn't going to end right there because it was very close. So, and then we go to Colosseo, which is 121-95 for Florida. You get Animo coming in for Sermon Jed, which is unanticipated by me. So you get Vancouver playing the Sojourn Tracer Zarya on his end, and Florida playing the Tracer Sombra Winston Luciana. And this went Florida's way, then Vancouver's way, and then Florida's way again. Because you have that Winston very aggressive, just basically bowling over and getting to the checkpoint almost immediately after 2 fights. Just diving right over False on the Zarya. And right into the backline. Aztec was like kind of on a flank thing, and he just got completely caught off guard somehow by the dive. And then they do a really good job at applying pressure on the spawn. You can't just walk past the Winston. He's doing more than that. You can't just go past him, right? And then Florida get the checkpoint. They disengage, and it's Vancouver's turn because they go really far. They pressure down someone. They find a pick, and they keep on going. They use their ults. And then eventually they get to about 95 meters and they don't move it again because Florida comes back. Yeah, Vancouver's get some fight wins. It's not just a straight up boom beeline for the 121 mark. But overall, Florida was getting more and more wins. They do a better job at keeping them in their spawn than Vancouver did. And that's just kind of how the Winston comp works. You apply more pressure in the Zarya there because you have the bubble. You can back away. You can jump away. And someone was going really crazy here. Someone was doing the bulk of the work. And there's another moment where Florida actually take the lead. Is when they looked like they're going to disengage and you expect them to wrap around main, but instead they actually come from like the checkpoint side onto the back line, which caught Vancouver completely off guard, and they end up taking the lead off of that play, which is a really smart play. Really good heads up play from someone I would assume as their main shot caller. So shout out to him for that. And then end up winning Coliseo. And then you go to Lijiang. It's a 2-0 for Florida, just a complete roll. Mira comes in for falls, but this time the Doomfist does not find anything. He's getting focused down on the hacks a lot better. And there's just no dive going on. And someone is putting in work again on the Winston. King specifically forcing down Mira with the hack. So then you have one tank doing a lot, one tank doing nothing. It's almost like nothing's happening there. And also you have Hydron and Checkmate. Just their dive looks incredible. They're super synced up. No matter where Vancouver go, they're just getting hacked. They're just getting dove on by the DPS and losing. And then you get Control Center, which was both teams, or which was Florida playing the Sojourn May or Risa Lucio Babcom that we saw earlier today, and Vancouver sticking on the Doomfist, but they're just getting rolled. Checkmate doing a great job with his May walls, splitting the entire team. Mirror just gives up on the Doomfist. He tries Junker Queen. He tries Orisa. He tries anything, but nothing's working. Florida are just dominating. And it's mostly off of those really great walls from Checkmate, but also they're just kind of bowling them over. It doesn't look like there's any resistance at all. So Tom, the player of the match for me, is going to go to Hydron. I think it's mostly because he turned that match around on Circuit Royale. He was so consistent, so great at shutting Vancouver down before they even got near Florida or the objective in general. Even before that, I thought he did pretty good on the Genji on Piriso. He gave them a genuine shot of taking the lead there, at least taking the map and stopping Vancouver from going up 2-0. And he synced up with Checkmate really well on the dives at the end there too. So even though maybe someone did have a better maps on the maps that they won, I think Hydron, that big turning point on Circuit Royale, was all him. Someone wasn't particularly winning the Sigma duel. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Hydron for the player of the match for me. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like this video, subscribe, all that stuff. Have yourself a good one, and deuces.